Captain Midnight.
So I'm gonna hold off on major spoilers in this video for as long as I can, and stick to stuff you could know from the trailers for a while, because I think there's a lot I can say about this show before I have to get into them. I have complained endlessly about the weird Spider-Man related projects that Sony has released since Venom back in 2018. Your Venom 2s, your Cravens, these bizarre, half-hearted attempts at big screen blockbusters that feel like incompetent MCU movies with the serial numbers filed off. But the Spider-Verse films always stood there as a great rebuttal to that, a sign that, under the right circumstances, these weird, off-kilter Spider-Man concepts can work. And I'm really happy to say that Prime Video's Spider-Noir, which sort of borrows Nick Cage's take on Spidey from those movies, is another major example of that. Because despite some minor pacing issues and a few bumps in the road, I ended up enjoying the hell out of this one. I want to get into what I liked about it this week. Before I do, thanks for watching. If you often find yourself watching my stuff and haven't subscribed yet, I definitely appreciate it.
My name is Ben Reilly. I'm related to this reality's Peter Parker. How? I'm his clone. Or maybe he's my clone. We're not sure.
So, alright, I'm dying to get into the characters here, but I feel like before I do, I have to touch a little bit on the interesting way that this project was released. No, not the binge model. I'm still a die-hard weekly release fan, by the way. I think this show would have benefited from that. But the options that Prime gives you for how to view the show, black and white versus color. I've seen a little debate about this online, with one side acting like one or the other is just objectively better. I don't really agree. I think they're both viable and look pretty solid. I started the show in black and white and ended up switching to color for episode 2. Some of you may find that indefensible, I don't know, but I will tell you why. A lot of this show is centered around tropes and ideas from old noir movies and pulp magazines. The black and white option makes a lot of sense in that context. But the show is shot digitally, and it really makes no effort to hide that, which is fine, but for me personally, it meant that its look didn't really remind me of the old film noirs much at all, which were, shot on film. I just had a really hard time letting that go. It didn't look like what it was trying to emulate much at all. The color version felt like a good alternative. And thankfully, when they say color, man, they mean it. Unlike so many streaming shows, Spider-Noir is bursting with splashes of color and feels vibrant in a way that reminded me a lot of like old Dick Tracy Sunday comic strips. And I think Dick Tracy, along with Golden Age comics and pulp magazines, feel just as important to this show as hard-boiled detective movies, if not more so. So even though the color version may show some of the rougher edges of the special effects a bit more than black and white, that's just what felt right to me. I don't really think you'll go wrong either way. The two styles concept was novel, and I think it worked out well for everyone. And I'm definitely interested to see if other shows pick up on this in the future. But alright, let's talk about Ben Reilly. I went into this thinking he'd basically be Into the Spider-Verse's Peter Parker, but with another name. And that wasn't quite true. Well, at least it's complicated. Ben is both more haunted and ironically a bit more cartoonish than his animated counterpart. Now there is some connective tissue there. The costume is pretty similar. That original comic design is just too good to stray that far from. And if you read between the lines, there maybe are some hints that these are the same guy. In Spider-Verse, Cage's performance is very heightened, as he's playing close to a parody of hard-boiled detectives, to fit in with the comedic tone of most of the alt-universe spider people in that movie. Surprisingly, or maybe not for Nick Cage, that isn't really toned down here that much. In his performance as Ben Reilly, he draws on a lot of old Hollywood actors, Humphrey Bogart being the main one. I think a little Jimmy Stewart sneaks in there too. And yes, as Cage has said, Bugs Bunny. The way Ben talks his way out of situations by using impressions of like Peter Lorre or Edward G. Robinson feels extremely Bugs Bunny. I can see why Cage cited him. I don't think it stops there either, as his Spider's fighting style is a lot more Looney Tunes than I was expecting. The grace of like Spider-Man PS4 is nowhere to be seen here. He's making it up as he goes along and getting beat to hell while he does it. One choice the show did make, and I'll warn you, I'm verging on spoiler territory a little bit here, but I'll keep it vague for now, is give him a real reason for his performance to be this over the top. Ben Reilly feels like this stereotypical 30s detective, and he has a reason to. It's been built into the narrative in a way that works well and allows for these goofy moments to coexist really seamlessly alongside some heavier material. There was a lot of concern when the trailer came out that the 60-something Cage was just too old to play this character, and having seen the show now, I just do not think that's the case. Yes, Ben is probably not supposed to be 60, but we're talking about a guy who fought in World War I, is living through the Depression, heavily drinks, and spent a few years getting his ass kicked in costume all the time. The fact that he looks a little worn and worse for wear fits the character much better than getting a Hollywood actor in his 40s that could pass for 28 in the right lighting. For some, I know Cage and his unique brand of acting will always be a distraction, but I think the show really makes it work. Then there's his superhero persona. He's not Spider-Man in this one, he's the Spider. Fun fact, there is a classic pulp hero called the Spider, and he debuted in 1933, the same year this story is set. He was also a World War I vet. The similarities basically stop there though, as our Spider doesn't tend to gun down bad guys by the dozen. His crime-fighting techniques tend to be a lot more like Peter Parker's, except worse in just about every way. This sounds like a major criticism, but it really isn't. I really enjoy just how limited Ben's strength and powers seem to be. Spider-Man getting beat up badly isn't anything new, but the Spider, fresh out of retirement, will struggle with even enough non-superpowered mobsters. You put a couple supervillain types together, and it's a real challenge for him, with him having to scrape by using every ounce of skill and wit that he can muster. I think this works really well for a show that doesn't want everything he fights to be some Venom-level threat, and gives us a hero that feels like he really has to earn every win. The supporting cast is a nice blend of original characters and old ones, reimagined for the 1930s. His secretary Janet isn't the most fleshed out character in the world, but is a very likable presence. The real standout for me though was this take on Robbie Robertson, played by New Girl actor Lamorne Morris. Instead of an important editor at the Daily Bugle, this Robbie is an overlooked and underappreciated reporter. A guy who is sitting on a news story that could resurrect his career, like he knows the identity of the Spider. But he has so much loyalty to Ben as a friend that it feels like it would never cross his mind. The three of them function as our core cast, and I really enjoyed their scenes together, even if the dialogue between them tends to be the least era appropriate for the show. That may annoy you, but if you could look past that, I think there's a lot to like about these three. Now, this all may have been a little too syrupy sweet if the show didn't have some decent villains to back it up. And thankfully, we're in really good hands here. I will say right now, I am a big Brendan Gleeson fan. I think his performance in The Banshees of Inisherin is one of the best of the 2020s, and with all due respect to Spider-Noir, he's kind of vastly overqualified for this show. On paper, Silvermane is a solid character. I'll talk about why more in a bit, but Gleeson's presence just elevates this role so much. Now, in a show that has its fair share of gangsters that feel closer to like old mob movie stock characters than real people, every moment with him feels real. It's hard to play this kind of tough guy mob boss and not have it be immediately cliche. But Gleeson brings a real sense of specificity to this guy that goes a long way towards avoiding that. One thing I enjoyed about Silvermane is how much more he seems to like those who disrespect and kind of mess with him a bit than he does for like his own guys. When you work for him, he can be scary, threatening, and overbearing, but for those people outside of his employ, he seems eager to win them over, to chat, to get to know them and size them up. A lot of my favorite scenes in the show are him and Ben talking in scenes that, on the surface, are completely calm and civilized. As they work to deceive and flatter each other, his henchmen are a lot less interesting, but as a Spider-Man fan, I don't know, I kind of enjoy these old-fashioned mobsters. Spider-Noir is set much closer to when the first Spider-Man comics were made than we are now. And a lot of those issues in the 60s really fell back on like the old pulp magazine depictions of mobsters. Stuff that even 10 years later in the 70s would have felt painfully out of date. The result is that the henchmen of Spider-Noir feel closer to a lot of the low-level crooks that Spidey was fighting in the early days of Amazing than anything you're likely to see in a contemporary Spider-Man project. And I enjoyed that more than I expected. As a detective show, I think Spider-Noir is pretty basic. If you're looking for the winding, downbeat stories and mysteries of the noir genre, it may come up a bit short. Chinatown, this is not. But where it really shines is as an ode to pulp stories and propulsive superhero storytelling. There's a street-level charm to Spider-Noir that really shines through. It's not concerned with being prestige TV, it just wants to tell a Spider-Man story. And I don't think that's damning it with faint praise, because I love a well-told Spider-Man tale. Unlike a lot of the old Netflix shows that seemed a little uncomfortable embracing their comic book origins, or the Disney Plus shows that have to focus so much on expanding the MCU, Spider-Noir is happy to jump feet first into what made superhero comics so enjoyable in the first place. But okay, I think it's time to dig in a bit more here. So, massive spoiler warning for those who haven't seen the show yet but want to. I'm gonna get into the season plot. A lot of these 8 episodes revolve around Cat Hardy, this show's version of Felicia Hardy, the Black Cat. She doesn't do much in the way of burglary here. Instead, she's a lounge singer kept on a tight leash by Silvermane. She's also romantically involved with Flint Marko, Sandman, who at least power-wise is much more in line with the comics. Hardy ends up being the femme fatale of Ben's story too. And she's kind of the thread that brings everything together. I guess you could say her web connects them all. I like Kat, but one of the major issues I have with the show is I don't think her and Flint, who we really need to buy as like star-crossed lovers, just have much in the way of chemistry. Their relationship is such an important aspect of the story, but the sparks aren't exactly flying on screen. I think her relationship with Ben and her relationship with Silvermane are a lot more interesting. Now, according to Hardy, her relationship with Silvermane isn't sexual. He just has this obsessive fixation on keeping her in a gilded cage. Whether this choice was made to make the show a little more family-friendly or not, I think it adds a strange and fascinating dimension to Silvermane. He seems to want to keep this glamorous life with her at this fancy lounge almost sealed off from the rest of the world. That relationship with her and Silvermane is nightmarish, and it feels fitting that she's the one to take him out. Which leaves our other main villain, Megawatt, for Ben to deal with. Now, Megawatt, he is no Silvermane. This performance is very broad and hammy, and I think the character with his somewhat generic madman rants is one of the weaker aspects of the show. Thankfully, the backstory here, which has all these World War I soldiers being experimented on, is a lot more interesting than the character himself. I've said this before, but I tend to feel that genre fiction is at its strongest when it takes something from the real world and blows it up to extreme proportions. And that's definitely the case in this show. All these men come back from the war broken and unstable, with violent tendencies that are literally destroying them from the inside. Some of them, like Ben and Ogden, are able to keep some sense of who they were before all this. Flint and Lonnie Lincoln are almost destroyed by it, while Megawatt comes back drunk on his own power and his ability to inflict pain. Speaking of Ben though, this idea that he had to relearn how to be human from the movies is a very fun aspect of his character. It gives Cage license to go very over the top when he wants to, and since they hold off on this reveal, it eventually adds some extra dimension to just how much the war changed him. When he comes back from it, he's literally a man pretending to be like everyone else, trying not to show this potential monster inside him. The final battle is kind of standard superhero stuff, but executed well. Still, I think the last 15 minutes or so after Silvermane are really made by Kat and Ben's final conversation. Everything seems kind of tied up in a bow, but he makes it clear that no, there is still some bad blood here. He's not completely willing to forgive her for her betrayal, and there's no walking that back and returning to how things were. It's a bittersweet note in an otherwise happy ending, and keeps some of that noir sensibility intact. In the end, I think Spider-Noir is a stronger pulp superhero show than it really is a detective show, and there's no shame in that. It confidently brings to screen a version of that Into the Spider-Verse character that retains what made him so fun in that movie, while also adding a lot of extra dimension. At first, I was a little afraid that the dead girlfriend angle was gonna feel kind of tacked on and lazy. But as the show goes on, Ben reveals to have a lot more going on than that. Ruby's death is what made him give up on being the Spider for years, but what drove him to have the courage to be the Spider in the first place is actually just as interesting. I'm not sure if we'd ever get a season 2 of Spider-Noir, but I would definitely welcome one. It's pretty nuts that after nearly a decade of Spider-Man movies without Spider-Man in them, it's a streaming show that delivers us one of the best alternate takes on the character that we've seen in years. I do think Spider-Noir did a fantastic job of balancing its comedic and darker story elements, which is impressive because balancing tones is tough. That was a lesson that Vince Gilligan had to learn the hard way before he created Breaking Bad, and that tension is at the center of my latest episode of Showrunners, where he's the main focus. As the creator of some truly great shows, Gilligan had to guide enormous, complicated productions without losing what made them work in the first place. In this episode, I look at how he managed that balancing act, and why so many shows fail where he succeeded. And Gilligan is just one of the figures that I'm exploring. There's also an episode on Rod Serling, creator of The Twilight Zone. Every installment of Showrunners dives into the people behind some of the most influential series in TV history. It's a project I've wanted to make for a long time, and really a way to unpack how television actually gets made. If you haven't seen it yet, now's the perfect time to start. You can watch Showrunners right now exclusively on Nebula, where it lives alongside exclusive videos from creators like Lindsay Ellis, Nando V Movies, and other shows like Cinema Styx's Let's Rewind. There's over 200 creators on Nebula now, and it's only growing. You'll also get all my regular videos there, ad-free. You can grab a 50% off annual membership for just $30 for the whole year, or about $250 a month. Head to go.nebula.tv/captainmidnight, use the QR code on screen, or click the link below to watch the Gilligan episode right now.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.